Last summer, Barcelona barely managed to find the funds for a single major transfer. They paid 55 million euros for Dani Olmo. Even back then, it seemed like a questionable decision. They strengthened the position that was already well covered. They even had to let Gundogan go on a free transfer, just to ease the squad and reduce the wage bill. And when it came time to officially register Dani, a full-blown scandal broke out. Barca resorted to clever financial maneuvers. They sold VIP seats at the renovated Camp Nou 30 years in advance. Apparently it worked. Since October, Olmo started helping the team with results. Goals, victories. His stats looked decent. But was he really worth all that effort? 55 million euros, bureaucracy, a wave of negative media. Besides, Olmo has a tricky injury record. Every year, he plays half the season. The other half, he is recovering. And the same thing happened in Barcelona. Now imagine Flick's Barca without Olmo. Would the team really be weaker? There are serious doubts. In matches against strong opponents, he didn't stand out. Considering how successful the season turned out to be, the transfer can be called a failure. But it probably wasn't necessary either. Given the current financial situation, that money could have been used for a backup striker to replace 36-year-old Lewandowski, who can't last a full season anymore. Still, you don't criticize winners. Barca is confidently moving toward new achievements. But some transfers were outright flops. Now let's take a look at those who cost their clubs a lot but delivered very little. Initially, we planned to give 5th place to a few overpriced transfers by mid-table Premier League clubs. They were record signings by Brighton that flopped, and Crystal Palace overpaying for Nketiah. But all of that pales in comparison to what happened at Arsenal. So we are breaking the format a bit and giving this spot to the loan of Raheem Sterling. Because that wasn't just a failed transfer, it was a missed shot at the title. In a season when Manchester City were out of form, Arsenal had a real chance to win the league. But instead of signing a quality forward, the club brought in a player who had long lost his form. Sterling was supposed to bring pace, experience, and goals. Instead, total silence. He didn't score a single goal in the Premier League. Just one goal in the League Cup against Bolton. That's all the former England national team star delivered. A player who not long ago was valued at 160 million euros. It's especially puzzling considering Sterling had already worked with Arteta at Man City. They knew each other well. The coach understood his playing style, the player, the coach's expectations. An Arsenal current system is in many ways similar to Guardiola's style of football, the one in which Sterling once thrived. So there should have been no issues with adaptation. But the reality turned out completely different. Sterling looked lost and unmotivated. No aggression, no desire to fight. As if he was out for a stroll, not playing a Premier League match. Instead of proving that he still has something to offer, he's just chilling. No effort in duels, no chance creation, playing at half speed. This isn't the Sterling who once terrorized defenders. It's a player who already seems to be mentally packing his bags for Saudi Arabia. Arsenal hoped to strengthen their attack. Instead, they got dead weight. At least, it was only a loan. In 4th place, we've put 2 transfer failures by AC Milan, Santiago Jimenez and Joao Felix. The season was already underwhelming for the Rossoneri, but here, let's focus on individual cases. We'll start with the Mexican. He was signed in the winter for 32 million euros. The expectation was that this transfer would help save the season, and at first glance, everything seemed promising. An experienced player, over 30 caps for the national team, a prolific scorer at Feyenoord. Even made his mark in the Champions League. He scored against City at the Etihad in the fall and started brightly in Italy. 2 goals in his first matches. But then, a decline. In Serie A, he never found his form. In total, just 3 league goals and 1 more in European competition. For a player who was supposed to be the new hope in attack, that's a failure. And what makes it worse, all this happened after Alvaro Morata was loaned out. Yes, he's not a top scorer, but his contribution to team play is miles ahead of anything Jimenez showed. Morata brings experience, structure, and off-the-ball work, but he was simply let go. No compensation. A fantastic failure by coach Conceição and the club's management. And now, Joao Felix. Leaving him out of this flop list would be unfair. He managed to fail at 2 top clubs in 1 season. First, Chelsea bought him. The fee was undisclosed, but the deal seemed shady. And in return, Gallagher was sent the other way. Felix never settled at Chelsea. Within months, it was clear they had to offload him. So came a new loan, this time to Milan. The club paid €5.5 million for just half a season. Quite a lot for such a short-term gamble. And the result? 0 goals in Serie A. His only assist was for a known goal. That's 2 straight seasons going nowhere. Felix is the kind of player from a past era. He takes risks, plays for himself, but doesn't contribute to the team's structure. His style belongs to the 2000s, not 2020s. He didn't adapt, he didn't evolve, and his approach just doesn't work in modern systems. Yes, he was once a star, but there is no room for players like that at top clubs today. Even worse, Milan already had Leao, a player with similar issues. Doesn't defend enough, plays for himself. And now there are 2 of them on the same team, in the same lineup. Trying to keep both on the pitch at once is like starting a match with 10 men. In the winter, Milan still had a chance to rescue their season, but they did everything to sink even deeper. Third place goes to West Ham's disastrous transfer campaign. Just 2 years ago, the club won a European trophy, and today they are fighting to avoid relegation in the Premier League. And this is largely the result of poor transfer policy. In the summer, the Hammers spent a huge amount of money, but almost every signing flopped. They paid €47.5 million for centre-back Max Kilman, and another €40 million for the loan with obligation to buy of Jean-Claire Todibo. Yet, the defense remained one of the worst in the league in terms of goals conceded, and that's despite having Julen Lopetegui, a defensive specialist, coaching the team in the first half of the season. Things weren't better in attack either. €30 million for Crescencio Somerville from Leeds, €23 million for 18-year-old Guilherme. But the most shocking signing was Niclas Füllkrug, a big name, expensive, and frankly senseless transfer. Even before the move, Füllkrug had a reputation of being injury-prone, but West Ham still paid €27 million for him. He turned 32 in February, meaning there is no resale value whatsoever. Yes, he featured for the German national team, but overall, he had only a few solid seasons in the Bundesliga. Before joining Borussia Dortmund, he played for average clubs, even in the second division at times. And suddenly, in London, someone decided this veteran would be a dominant force in the Premier League. What they were thinking remains unclear. The injuries didn't go away. In the end, just 3 goals all season. And even without the injuries, Füllkrug was unlikely to become a top scorer by Premier League standards. The blame for this failure and the entire summer campaign was taken by technical director Tim Steiten. It was Steiten who brought Lopetegui to the club, and the entire transfer strategy was built around that coach. But betting on a mid-level manager didn't work. That's something you might do if you're hiring someone like Klopp or Guardiola, or if the coach has already delivered results at the club. But West Ham chose to gamble and lost. In the end, both Steiten and Lopetegui were sacked midway through the season. At least the club managed to avoid relegation. Second place goes to Joshua Zirkzee. In the summer, Manchester United paid 42 million euros for a very interesting and unconventional striker. At first glance, the transfer looked promising, but even back then it was clear Zirkzee would only shine if he were used as a second striker, not just as a backup for Rasmus Højlund. But that's exactly the role he was given in Manchester, a backup. For a season, and he was immediately used as a rotational centre forward with very poor output. 3 goals and 2 assists in 32 matches. Some of his performances were outright disappointing. For example, on December 30th, in a home match against Newcastle, Zirkzee was subbed off in the 33rd minute and was loudly booed by the fans. Another unpleasant episode happened in the FA Cup. During the penalty shootout, Joshua missed his kick, and United, the defending champions, were knocked out early. However, just like in general, the failure here isn't entirely his fault. It's more the club's fault. The main issue was the improper use of the player, which neutralized all his strengths and unique qualities. At Bologna, Zirkzee was part of a clear structure under Thiago Motta. He was used very wisely, somewhere between a traditional number 9 and a false 9. That role is complex, creative, and requires freedom and tactical understanding. But at Manchester United, it's panic, pressure, and a fight, not for style, but simply to stay afloat in the Premier League. In such an environment, there is no room for tactical experiments. The spotlight is on Bruno Fernandes, who plays the role of a striker and is expected to produce magic. Zirkzee isn't a big enough star for the team to be rebuilt around him. If he manages to adapt on his own, good for him. If not, he is likely headed for a Sancho-style fate, loans, and eventual obscurity. And the main question for the club's management is, why sign these Dutchmen at all? Even journalists and bloggers immediately pointed out, as a backup for Højlund, Zirkzee wouldn't bring anything special to the team. Is United's football understanding really that poor at the executive level? First place goes to Juventus. This is one of the major failures of the year. It's primarily about the failed transfer campaign of the old lady, both incoming and outgoing. The team was significantly revamped under the new coach Thiago Motta. They sold 8 players for a total of over 100 million euros and let some others go for free. At the same time, they spent a record 197 million euros on new signings, the highest in the last 5 years. Juventus's management became enamored with the idea of rebuilding the club through a young, progressive coach and decided to spend as much as possible. It was a bold decision to hire a specialist with a complex football philosophy and immediately restructure the team around him. Perhaps Motta should have been given time to adapt, but as we all know, in top clubs, impatience rules. They can be generous at the start but immediately demand results. In the end, the risk didn't pay off in the short term, and Thiago was dismissed in March, bearing the entire project and the purpose of the summer transfers. Absurd! Now let's talk about the transfers themselves. The most expensive signing was Koopmeiners, around 60 million euros for the attacking midfielder from Atalanta, who has shown only half of what he displayed before. Fewer decisive actions, less confidence. In March, fans even booed the coach's decision to bring him on as a substitute in a match against Verona. Meiners is struggling. He moved from a vertical system to a club that plays the ball slowly and passes sideways a lot, a completely different style, and Motta even began experimenting with his position. In the second half against Atalanta, he played as a winger. The player probably didn't understand what was happening, and Juventus lost 0-4. The second most expensive transfer was Douglas Luiz. They bought him from the Premier League for 50 million euros. It seemed that a player with experience would immediately strengthen the midfield. Aggressive, tough, always among the top for fouls in England. But in Turin, he seems to have turned into a different player. The energy is gone, the pressure is gone. In the end, few substitute appearances, and even then, he hasn't delivered what he should. And interestingly, no new position or role changes were made for him. but he simply didn't perform. No one knows why. Another high-profile transfer, goalkeeper Michele Di Gregorio. It's hard to blame anyone here. Not the coach, not the management. It's just that one of the best goalkeepers in Serie A this season suddenly broke down. He previously saved Monza and had the best stats for XG saves. Now, he's one of the worst in the league for the same stat. Now, let's look at the outgoing transfers. And here too, there are reasons to shake your head. They sold central defender Dean Huijsen to Bournemouth for a ridiculous 15 million euros. He's only 19, yet already one of the most promising defenders in the Premier League. He's in top 4 interceptions. His value has risen to 42 million euros, and he will most likely be sold for even more. Another mistake, the sale of forward Moise Kean for 13 million euros. While Vlahovic struggles with his form, Kean is tearing up for Fiorentina. Already 17 goals in Serie A, the second highest scorer in the league. His price tag tripled, and all this without him, with no chance of a return. And the final touch. In the winter, the captain Danilo was dismissed without explanation, and when the defense crumbled in March, there was no one to fill the positions. In the end, hundreds of millions spent, the budget torn apart, and the team not only failed to improve, it became weaker. Now even a place in the Champions League is in serious doubt. This is a complete failure.